Like you, I just received my Spotify Wrapped for 2024, and I thought it might be a good time to talk about what we pay to stream music. Not that my Spotify Wrapped really summarizes my music listening habits for this year, because I stream across 4 different streaming services. So I use Tidal, Apple Music, SoundCloud and Spotify. And yes, I pay for all 4, and together they cost me roughly €40 a month. And yet, in a video about Tidal earlier this year, I paradoxically said that streaming music was free. Now, this caused some degree of consternation in the comments section. So somebody wrote, I pay €15 a month for mine, it's not free. And then somebody else says, where are you streaming for free, John? And then somebody else said, what on earth are you talking about free? So it's a lesson really for anyone making YouTube videos that one's exact choice of words matters. We must be as precise as possible. And on this occasion, I should have been more precise and I wasn't. So what I should have said was that streaming music is effectively free. So let me explain.
This episode is brought to you by Bowers Wilkins, makers of the PI8 True Wireless IEM. Click the link in the show notes for more information.
Now, some audiophiles can live with a small collection of, say, 50 or so albums. But not me. I can't really relate to those people, and I can't relate to anybody who spends thousands of dollars on hi-fi hardware to improve the sound of only a handful of albums. So my thirst for music is greater than my hunger for hi-fi. So music is the fuel in my audio engine. It's the horse that pulls the hi-fi cart. It's why I call myself a music first audiophile. And given a day or so to write them down, I could build a list of 1,000 essential albums off the top of my head without really putting in very much effort. Now, when I say albums, I'm talking about albums, mini albums, EPs and single. It's like a catch-all term. And if I'm into an artist, I generally want access to most, if not all, of that artist's entire catalogue. Now, to own my list of 1,000 essential albums for life, I would need to buy each one on vinyl or CD, or maybe cassette, but I don't want to talk about really niche formats today. So let's first assume that I buy everything on CD. And we will immediately dispense with the second-hand pricing and the markdowns so as not to give physical formats an unfair price advantage. So if I buy each album brand new from a retail outlet, I'll probably pay around $15 per CD. Now, I realise that some new release CDs sell for more than $15, but many others sell for less. So $15 is an estimated median. And at $15 per CD, my 1,000 strong CD collection would cost me 15 grand. And that is, I'm sure you'll agree, a long way from free. Now, I could rip these CDs to a music server for a home streamable collection. I could even stream it out of the house if I use Roon or Plex. Now that brings downloadable FLACs into the conversation. So now we ask, what if I built my 1,000 essential album collection from downloads alone? Now for that, we'd need to assume I could find everything on Bandcamp, Bleep, or Boomcat, or similar kind of download store. So maybe Qobuz, or wherever you buy your downloads. And that's probably quite a big ask actually, but let's assume that's true. And if we also assume a median cost of $10 per album download, I'd still be looking at 10 grand to assemble my 1,000 essential album collection. But of course, vinyl is now, at least in America, the most popular physical format. And I dig vinyl as much as I dig CDs. I collect both. So let us now consider buying those 1,000 essential albums on vinyl. So if we peg the estimated median price of a new record at a conservative $30, buying 1,000 albums would run me $30,000. But of course, in reality, used records and bargain bin pickups would see me spend less. But I think it's clear that assembling a music collection on vinyl is also a long way from free. Now, what about streaming? So pricing for Tidal or Apple Music's lossless streaming varies by territory, but let's assume a monthly subscription fee of $15 a month. And I also think that a smattering of my 1000 Essential Albums might not be on streaming services, but I think it's safe to assume that at least 950 would be, if not in my preferred format or version or master. Now, many viewers right now will already be yelling at their screens to point out, somewhat desperately to me, that we own our physical formats and streaming is renting. And those people, they would be right? It's true that when you stream, you rent, you don't own. So let's consider a lifetime's supply of streaming. Now, assuming a 50-year subscription window, which I think would cover a lifetime supply, I think, $15 a month multiplied by 12 months in a year, multiplied by 50 years, gives us a total of $9,000. And factoring in inflation, that $9,000 might rise to $15,000 over a 50-year lifespan. I don't say we're going to live for 50 years. I'm just thinking, okay, between roughly the ages of, say, 15 and 65, we might pay for streaming services. So I think it's fair to say that a lifetime supply of lossless streaming will cost me or you anywhere between $9,000 and $15,000. However, our streaming calculations have yet to consider the cost per album. So if I restricted my day-to-day listening to the 1000 albums on my essentials list, I'd be looking at a per album price of between $9 and $15. And that's not too dissimilar to buying everything on CD. But this doesn't take into account new music discovery. So over 20 or 30 more years of music fanaticism, my list of essentials might expand to 2,000 albums to cut that per album cost in half. And if I were to arrive at 3,000 essentials, I'd be looking at roughly between $3 and $5 per album. Now, my Roon Nucleus server tells me that I have around 8,000 albums stored as FLAC on its internal SSD, and I consider each one essential to some degree. So if we divide $15,000 for a lifetime of streaming service access by the 8,000 essential albums available on that same streaming service, I would pay just over $2 per album for a lifetime of pseudo ownership. Now, I'm sure you can see where I am going with this, right? Because Apple Music and Tidal both boast a library of 100 million songs. Now, assuming 10 songs on average per album, that's 10 million albums. But let's not do that, right? Let's go a bit further. Let's assume 20 songs per album for an estimated 5 million albums per streaming service. So $15,000 divided by 5 million albums drives our per album cost down to, get this, 1/3 of a cent. That's 1/3 of a cent for a lifetime's access to each album. And not even the most optimistic used CD and vinyl pricing would get us even close to that. And in the context of the 1990s, where each album ran us at least $10, it's laughable. So no wonder all but the big name artists consistently complain about streaming's meager remuneration. And that's what I mean when I say that streaming is effectively free. Anyway, if you like this video, you know what to do, and join us on Patreon for a month if you feel like buying me a cup of coffee to say thanks. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. Oh, I have 5 more thoughts on this matter just to kind of wrap this thing up. Number 1, yes, I know that the money paid out by streaming services goes to the rights holder, which is then split with the artist according to a contract. Yes, sometimes that money goes direct to the artist, but usually it goes to the rights holder. Number 2, Daniel Ek made more money than Taylor Swift last year. I think it was around $300 million from the sale of shares. And some people might reasonably argue that this $300 million belongs to musicians. Number 3, I realise that many people will resist this idea because it would affect them personally and in the wallet, but I think music streaming subscriptions are far too cheap. If we wish to see artists get paid more, we, as consumers, we need to pay more. So number 4, with 250 million people around the world currently paying for Spotify, raising the price per month by $2 would generate more than 300 million in revenue, and raising the price by $5 a month would net close to an extra $1 billion in revenue. And number 5, if you think that's not the answer and that the streaming revenue system is broken, and I won't argue with that, please tell us specifically how it is broken.